It was 11:47 at night when my sister-in-law posted a photo of herself in a sequin dress holding a champagne flute, and I know the exact time because I was sitting in a hospital waiting room reading it off my phone while my husband was in emergency surgery. I had texted the family group chat 4 hours earlier. Just a few lines. Something like, "We're at St. Christopher's. His appendix ruptured. Please pray." And then I sat down in a plastic chair next to a vending machine and I waited. My mother-in-law responded first. A heart emoji. Then nothing. My father-in-law never responded at all. My husband's older brother sent a thumbs up. Just that. A single thumbs up. And went quiet. And my sister-in-law, Audrey, the one who lives 22 minutes from the hospital, the one who calls herself my husband's best friend in the whole family, she posted that photo at 11:47 with the caption "Girls' Night, can't be stopped," and tagged the restaurant downtown. I screenshot it. I don't know why. Something in me just knew. My husband's name is Patrick. We've been married for 3 years. Before we got married, his family was everything to me. I grew up with parents who were distant in that quiet Midwestern way. Not cruel, just not warm. And when I met Patrick's family at Thanksgiving during our first year of dating, I remember thinking, this is what I've been missing. His mom, Kathleen, pulled me into a hug like I'd always been there. His dad, Gerald. Wait. No, I said I wouldn't use that name. His dad, Warren, shook my hand with both of his and said, "We've heard so much about you." Audrey taught me their family's pie crust recipe that weekend. I cried on the drive home and I told Patrick that his family felt like coming home. I think about that drive a lot now. Patrick and I had been trying to get pregnant for 14 months when his appendix ruptured. I mention that not because it's relevant to the surgery, but because it explains why I was so alone in that waiting room. We hadn't told anyone we were trying. We hadn't told anyone about the 2 miscarriages, or the diagnosis of unexplained secondary infertility, or the specialist we'd started seeing. I was carrying all of that silently, and Patrick was the only person I talked to about it, and now he was behind a set of double doors somewhere, and I didn't know when he was coming back. I called Kathleen at 8:15, before the surgery started. She answered on the 3rd ring and I could hear the TV in the background. I explained what had happened, that he'd been in pain since that morning, that we'd waited too long, that the ER doctor said it had already ruptured. She made a sound like she was absorbing it. She said, "Oh, that's not good." And then she said, "Well, keep us posted," and she got off the phone. Keep us posted. Like I was a news service, I went back to the plastic chair. A woman across the waiting room was knitting. An older man was asleep with his chin on his chest. A teenage girl was doing homework on her lap. Nobody looked at me. I felt completely invisible and completely exposed at the same time, which is a strange combination of feelings that I don't have a better word for. I texted the group chat at 8:42 when they took him back. Surgery starting now. Doctor says 2-3 hours. I'll update when I know more. My brother-in-law Donovan sent a prayer hands emoji. That was the only response before midnight. I want to be precise about the timeline because I've gone over it so many times in my head that I need to say it out loud, or type it, or whatever this is. From 8:42 to midnight, nobody called me. Nobody offered to come. Nobody asked if I had eaten, or if I had someone with me, or if I had someone with me, or if I needed them to pick up anything. My own parents were in Phoenix and I hadn't called them yet because I didn't want to worry them before I knew something concrete, which in retrospect I think was a mistake I made because I had gotten so used to treating Patrick's family like my nearby support system. They were 22 minutes away, all of them. Kathleen and Warren live in the same suburb, Donovan's apartment is closer to the hospital than theirs, and Audrey rents a place literally 1 exit off the highway between our house and St. Christopher's. 22 minutes. I ate a granola bar from the vending machine at 10 Eider. It was honey almond. I remember staring at the wrapper for a long time. Patrick came out of surgery at 11:30. The doctor found me in the waiting room and explained that it had gone well, that the rupture hadn't spread as far as it could have, that he would need a few days in the hospital and then several weeks of recovery at home. I started crying before she finished the sentence. Not sad crying, just the kind that happens when your body finally lets go of something it's been holding. I thanked her probably too many times. I went and stood in the hallway outside the recovery room and I texted the group chat. He's out. Surgery went well. He'll be here a few days. Thank you for the prayers. Audrey's photo posted at 11,047. I went home around 2 a.m. when the nurses told me Patrick was stable and sleeping, and that visiting hours started at 9. I sat in my car in the parking garage for a few minutes before I started driving. I felt like I was in a movie where the sound had been turned down, everything muffled and slightly unreal. I drove home. I fed our cat. I lay down on top of the covers without changing my clothes, and I stared at the ceiling. Nobody called the next morning. I was back at the hospital by 8:30, and I sat with Patrick while he drifted in and out of sleep, and at noon Kathleen texted asking how he was doing, not to me. She texted Patrick directly. He was asleep. I saw the notification come up on his phone on the table. Here's what I want to say clearly. I'm not someone who needs constant attention. I don't require a crowd. I've been independent my whole life, and I'm proud of that. But there is a specific kind of loneliness that comes from sitting alone while the person you love most is in a hospital bed, and you know that the people who are supposed to be your family are out there doing normal things, eating at restaurants, watching TV, sleeping, and not one of them has thought to call you, not to check on you, not even to ask if you need someone to bring you a coffee from down the street. Patrick was discharged on day 3. Donovan stopped by the hospital the morning of discharge, spent about 20 minutes, and took a few photos that he later posted with praying for my brother's speedy recovery. Audrey sent a fruit basket to our house. It arrived the day before Patrick was cleared to eat solid food. It sat on the counter going slightly soft until I finally threw it out. The recovery was 6 weeks. Patrick couldn't drive, couldn't lift anything, couldn't manage the stairs easily for the first 2 weeks. I work remotely as a project manager, which meant I was able to be home, but I was also trying to manage a full-time job from our kitchen table while being his primary caregiver. I started ordering groceries online because I couldn't leave him alone for long stretches. I called my mom in Phoenix more than I had in years. She offered to fly out twice and I said no both times because I genuinely thought Patrick's family would show up in some meaningful way eventually. They didn't. Kathleen came once on week 2. She stayed for an hour and a half, sat on our couch, ate the lunch I made, and talked mostly about her neighbor's recent renovation. She didn't do a single dish. She hugged Patrick when she left and told me it was good to see me. I stood in the kitchen after she drove away and I just looked at the wall for a minute. It was during week 4 that I found out about what Audrey had been saying. Patrick's cousin, a woman named Faye who I've always liked, texted me out of nowhere on a Tuesday afternoon. Just, "Hey, can we talk? Not urgent, but want to touch base." I called her that evening and she said she was going to tell me something and she hoped it didn't upset me too much, but she felt like I deserved to know. Audrey apparently had been telling people in the family that I was handling the whole situation badly, that I was being dramatic, that I'd called Kathleen the night of the surgery in a state, her word, a state, and been almost impossible to deal with. That Patrick had texted Audrey from the hospital the next day saying I was overwhelmed and struggling, and that he was worried about me, and that the reason nobody was coming around much was because they didn't want to stress me out further, because I seemed, and this was the phrase Audrey had apparently used more than once, not quite stable right now. I sat with that for a long time. Faye said she'd heard it from Donovan's girlfriend, who'd heard it from Kathleen, who'd apparently gotten it from Audrey. By that point, it had spread to the aunts on Warren's side, to a couple of the cousins, even to Patrick's college roommate, who was still close with the family. The story was that I was fragile, struggling emotionally, that people should give us space. What had actually happened was this. I had called Kathleen. I had been scared. I had explained the situation clearly. I had asked her to please come, or send someone, or do something. She had said keep us posted, and that was the whole of our interaction. I did not call her in a state. I was upset, yes. I was sitting in a hospital waiting room at 8 o'clock at night because my husband was going into emergency surgery. Being upset was a reasonable response to that situation. Patrick had not texted Audrey saying he was worried about me. He didn't have his phone until day 2. And when I showed him Faye's message, The look on his face was the look of someone who is genuinely confused and then genuinely sick to their stomach. I asked him as carefully as I could if he had said anything to anyone about me struggling. He said no. He said the only thing he'd sent was a thank you text to his mom for the heart emoji. He said he was sorry. He didn't know what to do with any of it, and neither did I, not right then. We sat with it for a few days. Patrick called Donovan and tried to gently ask some questions. Donovan was defensive and vague, but confirmed that yes, there had been some conversation in the family about my emotional state, and yes, Audrey had been part of it. Patrick asked what specifically had been said. Donovan got uncomfortable and said he didn't remember exactly. Patrick called Audrey. She didn't answer. She texted back 2 hours later saying she was slammed at work, and could they talk later in the week? He said sure. She never followed up. I had a work call I couldn't reschedule that Friday, so Patrick was alone in the house for the first time in weeks, and he spent part of that afternoon texting with Faye, who had become something of a reluctant source of information. She told him she'd gone back and asked Donovan's girlfriend directly. When did Audrey say these things? How specific was she? And Donovan's girlfriend, to her credit, said it had been going on since week 1, that Audrey had framed it almost like concern. She was worried about me. She didn't want to overwhelm me. She thought maybe I was having some kind of breakdown related to stress. And because Audrey was the one who lived closest and ostensibly knew the situation best, people had believed her. Patrick was quiet that evening. He didn't say much at dinner. Later, sitting on the couch, he said, I keep thinking about how alone you were in that waiting room and they weren't there because of something she made up. Yeah, that's the part that stays with me too. We decided to address it directly, but we wanted to do it right. We didn't want a screaming match or a dramatic group text confrontation. Patrick asked his cousin Faye if she would be part of a video call. Just her and us and Audrey, where we could have an actual conversation with someone else present who knew what had been said. Faye agreed immediately. She was, I think, relieved that something was happening. Audrey took 4 days to confirm a time. We all got on the call on a Sunday evening. Patrick started by saying he wanted to understand something and that he hoped we could be honest with each other. He said he'd heard that there had been some conversation in the family about me not being okay, and that it had been a reason people didn't come to the hospital or come around during his recovery. He asked Audrey if she could help him understand what had been said. She was quiet for a moment, then she said she was just worried about me, that I'd seemed overwhelmed when she talked to me. Patrick said, When did you talk to her? She said she hadn't talked to me directly, but she had picked up on things from Kathleen. Patrick said, What things specifically? She shifted, said she didn't remember the exact conversation, said she was just trying to protect us. Faye said, quietly, but clearly, Audrey, you told me she was not quite stable. You said Patrick texted you from the hospital and was worried about her. Is that true? There was a pause that lasted a long time, and then Audrey said, I was trying to explain why nobody should just show up. I had stayed quiet through most of the call, but I spoke up then. I said, I was alone in that waiting room for almost 6 hours. I texted the family when surgery started. I updated you when it was over. I never asked anyone not to come. I never told anyone I didn't want visitors. I was sitting by a vending machine eating a granola bar by myself while Patrick was in surgery, and I would have given anything for someone to just walk through that door. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then I said Patrick never texted you from the hospital. He didn't have his phone the first day. I was there the entire time. So where did that come from? Audrey said. I might have misunderstood something. Faye said, From who? Audrey didn't answer. Patrick ended the call shortly after. Not angrily, he just said he thought they all needed some time to process this and that he would be in touch. He was very calm. I think he was in shock in some way that looked like calm. After the call, Kathleen reached out to me. I think Faye must have told her something had happened. She sent a long text that evening saying she was sorry I'd felt unsupported, that she should have come to the hospital, that she hadn't fully understood how serious it was at first. She said she wanted to make it right. She said she was planning to stop by that week with dinner. I read the text twice. I appreciated it. I genuinely did. But there was something in the phrase I hadn't fully understood that I kept coming back to. I had told her, on the phone, clearly, before the surgery. I had said, his appendix ruptured. The doctor said it's serious. I am scared. Please come. She had understood. She had chosen keep us posted. I didn't respond to the text right away. I talked to Patrick about it. He said the decision was mine to make about what I wanted my relationship with his mother to look like going forward, and that he would support whatever I decided. That meant a lot to me. Audrey sent me a text 3 days after the call. It said, "I know things got complicated. I hope we can move forward." I was thinking I could get us brunch reservations somewhere nice. I read it and set my phone face down on the counter. I thought about everything I had wanted to say to her on that call and hadn't. I thought about the 6 weeks I spent alone, managing Patrick's recovery, eating cold takeout over the sink at 11 o'clock at night because I'd forgotten to eat dinner again. I thought about the fruit basket going soft on the counter. I thought about a girls' night photo in a sequin dress posted 11 minutes after I told them the surgery was done. I didn't go to brunch. I didn't respond to the text. What I did do, I called my mom in Phoenix and finally told her everything. All of it. The recovery, the miscarriages, the loneliness of the past year, the waiting room. She cried. She booked a flight for the following weekend. She came and she stayed for 9 days. And she cooked real food and sat with me in the kitchen in the mornings and didn't require anything from me except my company. I cried more in those 9 days than I had in a year. It's been several months now. Things are different in a quiet, permanent sort of way. I see Kathleen occasionally at family dinners. Patrick still wants a relationship with his family, and I understand that, and I respect it, and I'm willing to be present in a civil way. But I don't call her when I'm scared anymore. I don't assume she's coming. I don't hold a seat for her in whatever mental space I used to reserve for family. Audrey and I are polite when we're in the same room. That's all. I don't think she's a villain. Exactly, I think she's someone who found it easier to explain my absence as a problem with me rather than a failure of all of them. That's a very human thing to do. It doesn't make it okay, but I understand the mechanism. Donovan apologized eventually, in a stumbling, indirect way that Patrick told me about secondhand. He said he should have called me. He said he thought someone else had it handled. I believe him. And I also think that's the saddest version of the story. That everyone assumes someone else was handling it and nobody was. What I know now, and what I want to say out loud even if nobody is listening, the waiting room is where you find out. Not the weddings, not the holidays, not the dinners where everyone is at their best and the wine is good and the conversation is easy. The waiting room is the test. The 8:47 p.m. text that says surgery starting now. The silence that follows, that's where you find out who shows up and who sends a thumbs up and goes back to their evening. I'm not angry anymore most days. I'm something more like clear-eyed. Patrick recovered fully. We are still trying to have a baby, quietly and with a lot of hope and some grief mixed in. And now my mom knows, and his cousin Faye knows. And when I picture who I'm going to call at 2 a.m. if something goes wrong again, that picture looks different than it used to. It's smaller and it's real. I don't think I lost a family. I think I stopped mistaking proximity for love, and that's a different thing entirely. It took a waiting room at night and a vending machine granola bar and a sequin dress and an Instagram photo for me to finally see it clearly. And honestly, seeing it clearly is better than not seeing it, even when it hurts. I keep coming back to the granola bar. Honey almond from a vending machine eaten alone at 10 p.m. while my husband was in surgery down the hall. That's the image that stays with me more than any of the rest of it. Not the party photo, not the thumbs up emoji, not even the video call where Audrey ran out of things to say. Just me and a granola bar and a waiting room full of strangers. I used to think the story was about what Audrey did. For a while I was angry enough to make it about her. But the longer I sit with it, the more I think the story is actually about what I chose to do next, and what that choice cost me, and what it gave me back. There's a kind of intelligence that has nothing to do with being book smart or professionally successful. It's the quieter kind. The ability to look at a situation clearly without flinching and see it for what it actually is instead of what you wish it were. I didn't have that for a long time when it came to Patrick's family. I had hope instead, which felt like the same thing but wasn't. Hope let me explain away the heart emoji. Hope let me interpret Kathleen's keep us posted as practical rather than cold. Hope kept me saving a seat for people who had already decided not to show up. What finally broke through wasn't anger. It was Faye's voice on the phone, careful and honest, telling me something I hadn't asked to know, and then the choice I had, whether to keep explaining things away or to actually look. Looking is harder than it sounds. Really looking at someone you love or someone you wanted to love and seeing the gap between who you needed them to be and who they actually are, that requires something I'd call a kind of moral honesty. Not judgment. Not a verdict. Just the willingness to say, this is what happened. This is what I felt. This is what was true. Audrey chose her comfort over my crisis and then built a story to make that choice invisible. That's what happened. I don't have to dress it up or soften it. And then there's what comes after the looking. That part requires something else. The kind of quiet stubbornness that doesn't announce itself, doesn't need an audience, just keeps going. I kept going through 6 weeks of solo caregiving. I kept going through the months of fertility treatment nobody knew about. I called my mom. I let Faye in. I rebuilt the circle smaller and truer, and I kept going inside that smaller, truer circle. That's not drama. That's just what survival looks like when it isn't performing for anyone. Patrick recovered. We're still trying. My mom knows now. Faye knows. Those are the people in my waiting room now. Not by geography, but by choice. I don't think Audrey is a monster. I think she was scared of inconvenience and told a story to make her fear sound like consideration. That's a very ordinary human failure. It doesn't owe me an apology I'll never fully get, and I don't have to keep a place for it in my life. The waiting room is where you find out, not at the holidays, not at the celebrations, at 8:47 p.m. on a Tuesday when something is actually wrong and you need someone to just walk through the door. Now I know who walks through mine.